All right, well, I'm Bill Cleveland. I attended Shades Cahaba first grade through fifth grade. We did not have kindergarten when I went to Shades Cahaba, so I went as long as I could. I also have two children, Andrew and Mary Catherine, who attended Shades Cahaba.
Welcome to the Shades Cahaba Oral History Project. I'm your host, Sean Wright. Today's podcast is my special guest, Dr. Bill Cleveland, the Superintendent of the Homewood City Schools. And also, you're a longtime Homewood student. You graduated in 1985.
That's right. Love it so much. I just decided to stay here and just stay in school, basically.
Why do we keep coming back to Homewood?
It's I'm sure my therapy sessions that I go through on separation anxiety, there's probably a study in there, but in the simplest form, it's almost like that comfort food, Sean.
Right.
You know, you find that comfort food you like, and there's something to be said about being comfortable. And I've really had no desire to live anywhere else.
When I was on the internet, I went out to find your history, and everything's correct on the internet.
That's right.
But you did go away, right? You went down to Auburn to be a youth minister.
Well, no, I was in. Actually, I was teaching school in Jefferson County at Minor High School, and which is on the western side of the county. And during that same time, I was doing an interim youth minister at Vincent, Alabama. So headed down towards the Auburn way. I was in Shelby County. So during the week, I'd go from one extreme of the county to a whole nother county. So that's where it was, in Vincent, Alabama.
Okay, you see, the internet is correct.
Well, the internet. I was fortunate enough to marry. My wife is from Auburn.
Oh, okay.
And we met here in Homewood, so at Dawson.
It was my dream to leave Homewood and never come back. And I went off to Auburn for college and came back and got my first job. And I ended up eventually owning 4 homes in Homewood. I just can't get away. I've even looked in other cities, but I just can't get away.
Well, it is a good location also.
It is a location. I couldn't move out to Hoover because that's too far. I can't put up with the 10-minute commute instead of the 1 minute
That's right.
commute.
We are spoiled here in Homewood.
That's the truth. I talked to Miles and I said, "Can you give me some dirt on Bill from his time at the school?" And we figured that the statute of limitations might still be in line, so he declined to give me any good information.
Ooh, that was money well spent on my part.
So what was it like coming through school here? Did you have any grand plans of being a teacher? I know you come from a educational background.
Right. Well, both my parents were in education. My father in higher education, and my mother by trade was a K-12 educator who eventually went back to college to get her RN and became a nurse. But there wasn't a grand plan when I was coming along to get into education. I believe it was some point in college where I realized that's where my calling was and where my heart was. Mm-hmm. And that's the way I decided to go. Definitely impacted by a lot of folks throughout my journey here through Homewood City Schools. There's no doubt about that.
Right. Just looking at your career, so you taught at Minor High School. You were at Bottenfield Junior High School for a while. You were an assistant principal again at Minor. You were assistant principal at Spain Park before you came back to Homewood, where you were the Homewood Middle School principal, which I can't imagine.
Oh, it's a great job. But what's interesting is when I went to Spain Park, but by the way, I was at Bottenfield fed into Minor. So at the time that Bottenfield was a junior high, it fed into Minor High School, and I had no desire to leave that area. It was a little further away was the only thing. So the superintendent of Hoover City Schools, which is when they opened Spain Park, was none other than Dr. Jack Farr, who was my high school principal.
Yeah.
And so getting to go work for him was something special and something that I will always kind of cherish. Very special. Middle school was quite possibly the best job I've ever had.
Really? Right.
Oh my goodness.
Was it the new middle school or the old middle school?
Yes, it was the last semester of the old middle school, and then we moved during the Christmas break.
So where we are right now, we're at the Board of Education, which is the football field of the old junior
Correct.
high school, and you actually drive through where that little track was out there, and
The bowl track.
one of my people I interviewed for an upcoming episode, we reminisced about how many times we had to run around that when we didn't want to do things. When
Yeah,
we
I think
were in trouble.
75 times equaled a mile, I believe, in that bowl track.
Yeah, so Miles was,
It also served as a swimming pool during heavy rains.
that's right. So then you came back, you were the principal here, and then you decided to get into the business side. You became the assistant superintendent for business operations, and now you've been superintendent since 2008. What does the Homewood system look like now for people who are not here in Homewood and listening to this? How many schools we got? How many kids are we?
Well, we've stayed true to really what has been at the heart and what's the kind of the culture of this system, which is 3 elementary schools, 3 locally walkable elementary schools that are at the heart of each neighborhood. Those 3 elementary schools feed into 1 middle school, and then the middle school feeds into the high school. Right. So 5 schools total. And I think at the heart of what we do, what really gets our tradition kind of established are these elementary schools.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty much the same since the day that Shades Cahaba stopped being a high school and Shades Valley became the high school. It's pretty much been the same thing. I guess in about 1954 was when the junior high was built. So we've had the 3 elementary schools, the junior high, and a high school ever since then. So what's it like coming back running a system that you were the student at? When everybody comes up like myself and goes, I talked to my brother and he told me these stories.
That part. Look, they hired me. They had my record. I mean, they knew everything. I actually think there were some kind of what some people might say are cute stories. My parents probably at the time did not think some of those stories were cute.
Right.
However, I think many of the things that I participated in or went through kind of have allowed me to have grace when grace is needed, to have a little more care when care is needed, and to also have a strong hand in discipline when that's called for, all of which are needed when you're dealing with adolescents or children or parents or things like that. So I certainly think my background was great. Our class was, everybody thinks their class was the best. Ours was probably a little more challenging, but I love all my classmates, and we see each other. It's a little daunting coming back to run a place that you love and have a lot of respect for.
Right.
And there's a little more on you, not so much to do a good job, but just not to let anyone down.
Right.
This was built on the shoulders of giants and with great families and with great students and with great educators and with great leadership and great city involvement by the city leaders and Mayor Waldrop. And I think a lot, Leslie S. Wright at Sanford, a lot of folks had vision. Then a lot of folks came after that and continued that vision. So I knew a lot of these folks. I looked up to a lot of these folks. So it's very, there's a little weight on you. Right. Let's make sure we continue this in the lines, and let's make sure we make folks proud that came before.
On the last episode, I spoke with Alexa McElroy, who's the PTO president. I had introduced to her about how far back the people have helped. Starting within a couple months of Shades Cahaba starting, there was the School Improvement Association. I think that's what it was called. It was the precursor of the PTA and then the PTO, and about how they jumped in and made sure that there was books so that they were accredited, and they helped build the lunchroom and got them out of the shack in the back and all these different things. So it started from almost the beginning of Shades Cahaba, and continues on now. And I think it's been a great legacy that's been left to us.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, this didn't just happen. This is, we're kind of standing on the shoulders of giants here in this community, and the local involvement, whether it's through giving of time or giving of financial resources or other types of resources, still continues today. And that example that was set a long time ago has served us well.
Now, back to when you were a student, if you could go back as a student and know a do-over, what would you change?
Wow. I would, there's some things I wouldn't change. I loved, Martha Whitson, who was Martha Bomar at the time.
Yeah, she was my geography teacher, geometry teacher.
Yeah, just phenomenal, and kind of helped get a love for math going that continued with Mamie Weber. That was just someone that I just loved to death. I'd probably pay a little more attention in all my classes. That's an interesting question. There's things that perhaps you wish hadn't happened. It's never good to, and I won't get into a story, but it's never good to walk up to or to have your name called at Homewood High School and to come to the office, and when you show up in the office, your father's already there, and along with a police officer.
Nice.
Those are never good times. So, the logical thing is to say, well, I wouldn't do this or I wouldn't do that. But the reality is those were major learning times.
Right.
For myself. And I think that's part of my story and part of my DNA, all these little times of, Mr. Dedrick having some quality time with me, whether it was at Homewood Middle School where he was our assistant principal, or he loved our class so much he followed us to the high school and became our assistant principal at the high school when we left Homewood Middle School. So, but, I think all of those things, I'm not sure I would redo anything because that kind of is the story that we have and can take with us and is in our DNA. And I do believe those things have allowed me to be a better educator.
I think failure is a great learning tool, and I failed many times, and the key is getting back up. And
that's right. I think my failures were many, but they were non-fatal failures. They were failures where the leadership and the administration and the teachers and my parents allowed me to learn from those, and they helped guide me, certainly, sometimes with a little more structure in the guidance, but I totally agree with you. I think that's helped make things a little more clear now.
I had Mike Miller call my name at homeroom one morning, and I'll never forget that feeling when everybody turned and looked at me.
Yeah, you remember back in the 80s, they didn't have the ability to call just one classroom. It was if you were going to call someone, you were calling all over the school.
Yeah.
And that was very.
And my infraction was minor, but it seemed huge.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, mine was a fun-spirited thing. Nobody was going to get hurt from mine, but it was not good.
Well, let's get back to Shades Cahaba. So, what are your memories? Who was your favorite teacher at Shades Cahaba?
Oh my goodness, I wouldn't say. There was one favorite teacher. Loved them all. Miss Walker, Miss Lemon, Miss Geis, Miss Judd, Miss Jordan, Miss Rainey. I don't even think I had Miss Rainey, and I loved her. Miss Summerall. I mean, they were just everyone that I came into contact with. But probably my favorite, aside from Mr. Levon, our principal, who just I loved to death, was Miss Riffle. Our PE teacher. And we kind of realized at some point we had a connection we both liked Kentucky basketball. And so that was kind of our connection. And the fact that, I was so much better than my brother. I think she appreciated that.
Better behaved?
Absolutely.
This will be your brother.
That's right. Better looking and better behaved.
Good.
Everybody
we need to get that out there.
Absolutely.
great teachers. We had all the same teachers, it sounds
Yeah,
like.
I'll tell you one thing that I never will forget, and I go in Shades Cahaba probably about 3 times a week at a minimum, and things have changed. Certainly physically the building has changed. The core outline is the same of the building, but one thing that's changed is where the lunchroom was located. That is now part of what we call the extended day program. However, when I walk down those stairs, I get vivid memories of going back to the lunchroom during a time where, they made homemade rolls. The hamburger steak was just to die for, with the tons of gravy and the real mashed potatoes. But of course, we had limited students at that point in time, and I don't know what it was like when you were there, but I know when I was at Shades Cahaba, we only had 2 classes per grade.
Right.
And your brother and I were in many of the classes. So when we were in first grade, there were just 2. Well, now we have 5 sections of first grade, and 5 sections of second grade, and 5 sections of third grade. And so there's multiple classes. So it's gotten a little larger.
I feel like I've talked about this on every episode, but my mom was the PTA president at the time, and I think that there was even talk about maybe shutting Shades Cahaba down at that time because there were so few students there than there are,
Well, I'm really glad they didn't do that.
Yeah, I am too. That would have been. We wouldn't be here talking about Shades Cahaba otherwise.
Yes, there are no talks about that.
When I was talking to Dr. Lowry, he told me that there's like in the low 500s in students right there. He said, which is probably about the perfect size for that school. But back when it was a high school and you had 1 through 12, there were somewhere between 12 and 1,400 students in that building. And that doesn't even include the gym and that set of rooms back there. And I just can't imagine being there with that many kids at that time.
Right. I think there was an auxiliary building up close to where the Board of Education is now.
It was.
The old Board of Education.
I think that was the Union Hill. That's where the first graders, 1st through 6th, might have been for a while until they moved them into the main building. And they did that pretty early on. So I don't think it might have even been in the 20s when they did that. But I'm glad to hear you talk about the lunchroom because we are doing an episode, a Lunchroom Ladies episode. One of the longtime lunchroom managers, Ida Tyler, who started in 1932, and she stayed until 1955. And she's the one who everybody talks about her rolls and about how great they were. Well, her great-grandson is Ken Kirk, who was in the class of 1980 and whose kids are going through.
Has had a son graduate.
Right.
Recently.
And so we did an episode talking about our favorite lunchroom memories. And one of those favorite memories for me was the peanut butter ball.
I totally know what you're talking about. Yes.
I should have had you on that episode. But that's coming up soon. So I'm not going to give any more of that, but we might have some recipes. We may even have the high school chili recipe.
Okay.
That I loved it so much I went back and got that.
Admittedly, the standards and some of the guidelines have changed since then. But boy, oh boy, I have vivid memories. And you know how sometimes you can go in certain buildings, rooms, areas, and the smell comes back to you. And I guess that could be a negative. In this text, I'm talking about very positive memories and senses. And there are some of those when I go into certain parts of Shades Cahaba. I certainly, the lunchroom is one of those. Very fond memories.
Well, since we've been, I mentioned something about the 30s. Let me go down my list of what happened in the 1930s. By 1932, the school had expanded to 22 teachers plus an associate principal. So for the first 12 years, it just had one principal running the place. More and more people are moving into Shades Valley, into Homewood at that time. The yearbook was called the Owl, and the newspaper was called the Owlette. And I'm assuming it was just because the owl was placed on the roof. We still don't know why the owl was there. Maybe you've got a a story about that. But it's a 900-pound cast concrete owl that's perched on the roof. The owl was the yearbook, and the school newspaper was the owlet. And I believe the newspaper was printed as part of the local newspaper, the local over the mountain newspaper, and it was just a piece in there. One of the things Shades Cahaba had was that we had a really good sports program. We had very good football teams, basketball team. I posted a picture yesterday on shadescahabahistory.com of the 1923 basketball team, women's basketball team. And I've got some other pictures of the teams. Even though we had an owl on the roof, we were known as the Mountaineers, or the Mounties for short, which has been carried on by Shades Valley. They took that name with them. And there's even a great picture of Coach Orrin Piggy Mitchell, where he's wearing this shirt that says Shades Cahaba Mountaineers, and there's an owl in the middle. So
makes perfect sense.
Right. He came in 1934 to Shades Cahaba. He started all the sports teams. He stayed until it became Shades Valley High School, and he went on with them. But he also brought basketball to county schools. A lot of these schools, Shades Cahaba included, did not have a gym. So they had what they called a dirt court basketball league. And it was all these teams that didn't have gyms and stuff could play each other on kind of the same field. So he came in 34. I mentioned in 1932, the lunchroom manager, Ida Tyler, was hired, and she stayed until 1955. We'll talk about her in an upcoming episode dedicated to lunchroom ladies. And then if you look through the yearbooks, you'll notice that there were many literary societies in the school. They had like 6 to 8 maybe each year. They also had like a model airplane club and hiking clubs and debate clubs. And then the 30s was also the Great Depression. And Jefferson County schools decided to close all their schools early to save money. But Homewood actually provided funds to keep Shades Cahaba, Edgewood, Rosedale, and Hall Kent, I'm assuming, open for 9 months of the year. Actually, I take that back. Hall Kent might have been closed for a little while, but all the other schools were open, which goes back to the way the community has supported the schools through the year. And also, Shades Cahaba High School was the only high school in Alabama to keep its Southern Association of Colleges and Secondary Schools accreditation throughout the Depression.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah, it really was. And to back it up a little bit, that accreditation started in 1920, that first year, 21. What happened was they didn't have enough volumes in the library, so that the PTA went out and made sure that they had plenty of books. So
it's interesting. I'll tell you, I remember the first time I did anything, singing, acting, anything. We put on a play for the parents in about second grade, I would guess. And I remember it was in that theater, which at the time seemed like the largest thing I'd ever been in. Now looking at it, it's a very small theater.
Yeah.
But that was quite a memory, thinking of how huge this setting is, and in reality it wasn't. There's nothing but pleasant memories with Shades Cahaba. The field, I remember one activity you think you go out on the field to play kickball and stuff. I remember a teacher taking us out to look for 4-leaf clovers and being out on that field. Just a wonderful time. I hate that our students now do not get to experience the real chocolate milk. And I mean real chocolate milk that one could get by going after school under the underpass across to what is now CVS. It was High-Cal Drugs. And they had a soda fountain there with the best chocolate milk. It was.
I'm trying to find more information on High-Cal. I love going there, and I can't find pictures of it. I can't find memories of it. But it was there for the longest time, and I love that little the cafeteria in the back. And you look at CVS now when you go in there, and it's bigger than it was when it was High-Cal. But I used to always get cigar boxes. I've still got tons of cigar boxes from there.
It was just great. I was more into the chocolate milk, and then when it would get warm outside, they made their limeades were, I mean, they would crush the limes right in front of you. I mean, the limeades
like Toomer's
there were
Corner.
great. Yeah, it was very much like Toomer's Corner, as a matter of fact, but super nice. And that was kind of where my mother would pick me up after school at High Kell. Jeff Underwood has some information about that. He'd be a great person to talk to about that. I will not do it justice other than to say that was a great memory as well. Now there is no High Kell drugs. Now I think of the Pig as kind of the place to go. I see a lot of our students, a lot of our families picking up students are going there now. And, you know, I talk about the milk and the chocolate milk and the limeades. You know, those were great. They sure were. But it's about people.
Right.
You know, we go to these places because they're safe, they're happy, they're good. And there were people in there that would take care of us and be happy to see us and knew our parents. And much like today with a place like Piggly Wiggly, when you go in there, you know, it's almost like everybody knows everyone. And there's part of that found in the spirit of Shades Cahaba and in the spirit of Edgewood and in the spirit of Hall Kent. And it kind of goes back to the culture I was talking about at the first. Right. And what kind of makes this community different. The folks who started these places. You mentioned at one time Shades Cahaba might not get its accreditation back in the early days because of the number of books. And so the people go get the number of books that they need. The parents do. And the community rallies around and supports. And, you know, perhaps we come back here because that's what's been modeled for us.
Right.
The proper way of doing things. And I would like to think that we're continuing that today for our students. And I feel strongly that Shades Cahaba certainly is doing that, as well as Edgewood and Hall Kent.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. This has been enlightening. I appreciate you helping us let everybody know about what happened in the 30s. And
you got it. Listen, I appreciate you doing this and providing this historical perspective as we're getting close to this big milestone and our celebration of 100 years of Shades Cahaba.
And for anybody who's listening, even though we're having this big event on October 13th, 2020 is the year. It's the 100 year. And this podcast, we're going to keep doing episodes throughout the rest of next year. So to do that, we need people to call me up and let me know their story so I can come talk to you and get it online and get it out there. But I appreciate you helping us get this off the ground.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sean.
All right, thanks. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Homewood Superintendent Dr. Bill Cleveland. And don't forget, you can subscribe to the Shades Cahaba Oral History Project at Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, or wherever you subscribe to your favorite podcasts. And you can also listen directly on our website at shadescahabahistory.com. Now, if you love listening to this podcast, please leave us a review at Apple Podcast, and don't forget to share the show with your friends. The Shades Cahaba Oral History Project is sponsored by SeanWrightArt.com. Yep, that's me. When you go there, look for the link to Shades Cahaba, and you'll find shirts and accessories featuring the exclusive Shades Cahaba Centennial Logo. This logo is based on an image on the cover of the OWL yearbook back in the 1920s. It has been updated to celebrate the 100 years of the school, and it helps us to offset the cost of producing and publishing this podcast.